Okay, 11-year-old son going into sixth grade with an IEP for other health impairment, which is like ADD, ADHD. Okay, they have the probative testing that they do, whether it's Galileo or whether it's iReady, things of that nature. It's probative assessments. They don't have to require your consent because it's given to all students. Even though your child has an IEP, it still doesn't require your consent because it's given to all students. So it's given 3 times a year, and your son has stayed in the high risk group. How they are teaching him is not working, yet he is getting A's and B's, and we'll cover that. How do I find strengths, weaknesses, and where, how in the testing can I find ways to show that they need a different strategy for teaching him math and English language? They've had 5 years to figure it out, and it's like they're just giving him the grade and pushing him through. Okay, all true. So, how would he be getting A's and B's? You need to look at your accommodations. Where are they accommodating your child? Accommodations are good, but at the same time, it tends to also get in the way of specialized instruction if you're not careful. Now, the other thing is many parents don't understand how these accommodations are being provided or what the purpose of the accommodation is. Now, as your child is getting older, and especially moving toward graduation, ninth grade and beyond, you need to be extremely careful on the accommodation side. Because if your child is tracking to, let's say, university or college, then at that point, 504 is very limited with regards to what can be a reasonable accommodation on a college level. And what you need to try to do is try to identify or connect what is typically provided on a university level with regards to accommodations and mirror that inside your child's IEP. Now, I'm not saying when you should start that. You know your child better than I do. But at the same time, where I frequently see this disconnect with where the child's grade level equivalency is at and their grades that they're getting, meaning that they're making A's and B's, but they're in the sixth grade, but their grade equivalency is third, fourth grade reading level and math level. There's a disconnect there. Now, how does that happen? It happens through over accommodation. That happens, and that's where the parent, when I ask them, well, what's the purpose of this accommodation? They don't really know, because a lot of this stuff was inserted into the IEP without a lot of questions or discussions in the IEP meeting. You need to go back and get clarification. And then you need to sit there and weed out the ones that are creating the crutch that is falsely providing this level of achievement. The other aspect is how they're weighting the goals or they're weighting the grades. Because if there's a lot of, let's say, open book or homework, and that tends to be weighted heavily as opposed to, let's say, a closed book test or a chapter test, then, at that point, and then the other one is if they allow your child to retake a test that they scored below a 60 on, then the second time around, I have frequently found that they're over accommodated on the second time around. So it's not really a true reflection of what they know in their performance. But the second time around, they were accommodated. You need to look at that stuff. That's where the connection is. But if you've given them 5 years, where do you come up with the strengths and the weaknesses and the methodology that is now your time to show that needs to be inserted? Number one, the reason I started with accommodations and the reason I started with looking at how they're weighting the grades is that if you go to your IEP team and say, hey, this isn't working, they're going to point to your grades and say, yes, it is. And they're going to point to the accommodations as working. So you need to come to the table with responses to those things before you're recommending a change in curriculum and methodology, which is what you're trying to get to. All right. But you need to sit there and deconstruct those problems first, because those things are contributing to your child's, masking the deficits, which is masking the weaknesses. And we're not being able to differentiate between the true strengths of your child and the true weaknesses because of those things. You have to attack those first. Then you need to ask for true, thorough reevaluation targeted in the areas of reading and math. You don't need one across the board, though you might need to also do a language evaluation that includes a pragmatic piece, which is social communication, to sit there and see if there's any latent language issues that are impacting your child's English language. There's typically a correlation between the two. Especially with ADHD with executive functioning. Now, we did that conference a few months ago on executive functioning deficits, and I highly recommend that you look at executive functioning and maybe ask for them to do a brief 2 assessment, which is a rating scale, BRIEF 2, okay? Have that filled out by staff, have them score it like they're supposed to. It comes with very good recommendations that you could use to further narrow down where your child's weaknesses are in the areas of executive functioning, which correlate over to the English language side. Then you need to sit there and target what aspects, what foundational aspects of English language is my child missing with regards to fluency, phonemic awareness, written expression, comprehension, those kind of things. And those are best suited narrowing the scope of and targeting, where your child is functioning in those areas. And sometimes they'll just give a traditional broad achievement, and that requires your consent, but still a broad achievement isn't necessarily narrowing down what it is that you're looking to accomplish. But from that, it should lead you to what peer-reviewed, scientifically based reading and math program that would be designed to attack those deficits to where your child will gain skills in those areas instead of being accommodated in those areas of weakness. So that's why you need to start with the accommodations, and where those accommodations are getting in the way of teaching your child the skills that will help them advance past that 3rd or 4th grade reading level, where a lot of kids just continue to spin their wheels for the rest of their life in their education career. Why? Because we're not attacking where the deficit is. And so many of those deficits are attached to phonics, believe it or not, which of course I think has a connection to language, just fundamental gaps. But at the same time, if your team is going to be attacking and making a change in this area, and that's what you're recommending they do, you need to find the right reading and math program that is scientifically and peer reviewed in order to address those specific deficits that you ended up discovering through an assessment requiring your consent evaluations. At that point, what you also need, the final thing you need to make sure that you do, is that the IEP team adopt that recommendation. Let's say they're using a peer-reviewed, scientifically based program already. Are they implementing it in the way that the manufacturer of that program recommended? Because it's only peer-reviewed and scientifically based if it's being used in the way that made it peer-reviewed and scientifically based. So I have many IEPs that I review that they're, let's say the school's saying, oh, this is an Orton-Gillingham based program. Okay. But Orton-Gillingham is recommending 5 days a week for 50 minutes a day using that specific program. That's what makes it peer-reviewed. And then I look at the IEP and they're only using it 2 days a week for 30 minutes. Well, the school is not using it per the recommendation that made it peer-reviewed. They would have had to move it up to 5 days a week for 50 minutes with somebody, a teacher trained in the Orton-Gillingham approach. So the devil's in the details, and you got a lot of work to do, but that's how you deconstruct it.